Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this special event to officially launch the 85th anniversary celebration of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine Postgraduate Institute of Medicine. In its 85 years of existence, the PGIM has and continues to fulfill its mandate of providing and facilitating continuing medical and health education within and outside the walls of the UPCM. This webinar is a key opportunity to highlight one of the most important goals of the PGIM, which is to partner in the achievement of higher education, particularly the Doctor of Philosophy or PhD in the health sciences. Thus, it is our honor to present to you our speaker for this webinar. On an unprecedented third term as the Dean of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, let us all welcome Charlotte Martinez Chong, MD, PhD.
First, let me thank Postgraduate Institute of Medicine Director Dr. Tej Gloria Cruz for inviting me to give this talk on a triumphant path to a PhD. Actually, I would much rather say it's a transformative path to a PhD because inevitably, this actually related to a lot of the work and stories over the years that I have been here at the UP College of Medicine. This is a slide that was actually used by Dr. Tej Gloria Cruz when she introduced me before during my first term as dean. I remember that when I saw this slide, I thought it best to use this in my future talks. I have been described by my former mentor in Toronto, Dr. Julian Nedzelski, as unstoppable. This is when I told him about my challenges at that time as a young female neurologic surgeon in 1994. I've always seen myself as persistent, taking action, not giving up until you get to where I wanted to go. Looking at my journey, it was in 1992 when I was first given the opportunity to pursue my PhD studies. Fast forward, it was only in 2013 that I was able to realize this. So 20 years seems such a long time, but I also realized that it wasn't just one end goal of chasing that PhD, but actually more than that. There were little adventures in between this long journey, triumphs and failures that maybe fueled me to keep on. PhD therefore was a goal and probably a what if back then. But I had really a vision as a clinician, as a surgeon, as a researcher, and as a Filipino. This has guided me to persevere, taking each end result as an opportunity to be able to continue on I can take. My interest and perhaps what if was when I was still a clinical clerk. It was in 1985 when I wanted to become a research assistant in the laboratory of William Brownell, who actually did work on outer hair cells and discovered prestin, which was the protein responsible for outer hair cell motility. Hair cell actually moves but I was not able to do that because my father actually wanted me to take the physician licensure exam after my internship here. So that had to be shelved. However, after I took the physician licensure exam, my father actually gave me funds to be able to go visit several cities. At the time, there was a Visit USA fair. For $400, you can visit 4 cities. So first, I went to Johns Hopkins University, where I met his mentor, one on the right, Professor Emeritus John Bordley, who actually discussed with me the fact that if I had wanted to practice in the Philippines, it would be better for me to take up my residency here in the country and just pursue a PhD or whatever fellowship I wanted after that. My last stop for that particular tour was the Bobby Alford Department of Otolaryngology, cochlear implantation program for adults. Maybe you'll be the first cochlear implant surgeon in your country. And that was quite a revelation. It was like a eureka moment for me. I actually thought that why not? And therefore, I was actually excited at the thought that I might be a pioneer cochlear implant surgeon in the future. So I took the advice of Professor John Bordley, went back to the Philippines, and I actually applied for residency training at the Department of ORL here at UPPGH. It was not a walk in the park. I remember crying after the interview because I thought I was not going to be accepted because my brother already got accepted the year before. But thanks to some of the consultants who voted for me to get in. And during my first year of residency, I had been very fortunate to be part of the ear study group that was actually organized by Dr. Chehamir and Dr. Jean Abes, who became my mentors for research all throughout my residency years. And that created opportunity for us to do some research in otology. And this paved the way for me being accepted for my fellowship, research fellowship at the Harvard Medical School at Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary. And on the left, you see Joseph B. Nadel, who was the chairman at that time, who actually gave me the opportunity to do 3 to 4 researches during the 1.5 year period. And after finishing the 1.5 years of my research fellowship, Nelson Kiang, the one you see on the right, gave me a book on physician as teacher. And in between the pages, he actually had an application for a PhD in hearing and science technology, which was being offered by both MIT and Harvard. And only years after that, when he told me that they had wanted really for me to be able to take the PhD because they realized that clinicians like me can actually do good basic science research. The last paper that I did for that fellowship was postnatal maturation of human spiral ganglion cells. And in that paper, we debunked the well-known notion that at birth, you already have the full complement of both outer hair cells, type 2 spiral ganglion cells, and for the inner hair cells, the type 1 spiral ganglion cells. At that time, the configuration was 5% for type 2 spiral ganglion cells and 95% for type 1 spiral ganglion cells. But this particular paper showed that the smaller type 2 type 2 spiral ganglion cells actually had about 25% complement compared to the 5% well known at that time. So we hypothesized that there was apoptosis happening during the first year of life. And this was quite fortunate because later on, this would be very crucial in my being able to become a member of a prestigious research collaboration and organization named the Collegium ORL Amicitiae Sacrum. After my fellowship at Harvard, I was fortunate to be accepted into the clinical fellowship in neurotology skull-base surgery under the tutelage of Dr. Professor Julian Edzelski, who was also the chairman at that time. This is the reason why I did not pursue a PhD because this particular training opportunity allowed me to have a salary for 1 year and be able to actually do hands-on surgery. When I got back in 1993, I was fortunate that Dr. Ed Jose already upgraded the equipment and we had a new surgical microscope that I could use for my initial practice. And of course, the Ear Institute was already set out by Dr. Manuel Lim. My father already had the space, and was pursued by Professor Dr. Chehamir as well as Dr. Abes in what became the RA 9245 that created the Philippine National Institute. Having finished this fellowship in the University of Toronto and Harvard, I was ready to do cochlear implantation, but it took another 4 years in 1997 when we did the first cochlear implantation in the country on a patient at St. Luke's Hospital. And you see here the headline where I was doing surgery with Professor Arnold. He came back after 1 year, and we did the first 2 adult cochlear implantation here at the Philippine General Hospital, and the rest is history. But having been able to do that in 1999 was the creation of the Masters in Clinical Audiology program jointly by the UP College of Medicine and the UP College of Allied Medical Professions under Chancellor Perla Santos Ocampo, Dean Ramon Arcadio, and Dean Susan Villegas of CAMP. The proponents were Dr. Hamir, Dr. Abes, Dr. Abner Chan, Dr. Tetch Gloria Cruz, and Associate Professor Dr. Joyce Marsan. A few years after that, in 2002, I was able to see an advertisement and an announcement about Sunil Dutt, who was able to do a PhD at Radboud University in Nijmegen, Netherlands. But having known Sunil Dutt as a fellow like me, doing a fellowship at, I think, at the University of Cambridge at that time, that maybe it's something that I ought to pursue and see how I can be part of a program like that. So that was always at the back of my mind. But doing all the researches, like in 2003, having published the initial papers on the prevalence of failed newborn hearing screening testing among NICU babies here at PGH, and being able to be part of a US NIH-funded study on correlation of hearing screening with developmental outcomes in infants over a 2-year period that was done in my province of Bulacan, we were able to establish the prevalence of congenital hearing loss at 1.38 per thousand, meaning to say that there's 1 deaf Filipino child born every 8 hours, or about 3 Filipino deaf children born every day. And we had known at that time that the Joint Committee on Infant Hearing in the US already promulgated the timeline goals of screening by 1 month, being able to confirm the diagnosis for hearing loss by 3 months, and being able to intervene with hearing aids by 6 months. So at that time, we thought that we would come up with a position paper. I was the vice president of the Philippine Society of Otolaryngology and Generic Surgery, and with my colleague, Dr. Rina Reyes Quintos, we were able to form a task force and were able to present our findings and initial foray into newborn hearing screening in 2007 through the establishment of the yearly CONCHA, Collaboration for Newborn Hearing Screening Advocacy, which went on for about 10 years. This was also part of the formulation of the Philippine Academy of Neurotology, Otology, and Audiology, where I serve as the founding president. So with that, we were able to have colleagues within the ENT community to embark on newborn hearing screening in different areas in the country. And we're fortunate that we were able to gather some preliminary data that actually help in us being able to advocate for a possible Newborn Hearing Screening Act, which in 2007 we were able to already do a community-based study, and in 2008 some cost analysis studies that were used as papers or evidence to be able to support our the bill that created the RA 9709 that was signed by President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in 2009 under the sponsorship of Senator Loren Legarda, Pia Cayetano, Manuel Lapid Jr., and at that time also as an offshoot of the earlier bills filed by Miriam Defensor Santiago. So this landmark law actually had an IRR that was actually approved by the Department of Health in 2010, 1 year after, and from 2011 to 2013, we already had all the initial pilot studies for the launch of the universal newborn hearing screening in this country, and actually later on a cost analysis of on community-based universal newborn hearing screening studies as well. So in 2011, actually 2008, I was fortunate to be able to attend this meeting of CORLAS, and at that time, Cor Kremers, who was the supervisor of Sunil Dutt earlier, was there. I approached him and asked him whether he could be a supervisor of possible PhD work, but he was not very acceptable of that proposition. But anyhow, I continued to do the studies, and in 2012, we were able to publish the auditory brainstem response latency changes in infants after maternal exposure to environmental toxins, which actually I was able to present in 2011 in a meeting in Belgium, at which point Professor Cor Kremers was again approached for a possibility of a PhD work at his university, and this time he was more receptive. So in that year, I started doing the work on my PhD under his guidance, and you can see here that I actually waited from 2011 to 2008 to 2011, but having been able to have at least 5 papers for my thesis book, as you see in the slide, I was able to successfully defend my thesis in 2013. And this is the graduation where I was being awarded my diploma from Radboud University Nijmegen with a panelists of experts in epidemiology, in ENT, pediatric otolaryngology, and so forth. And this is my diploma. So meanwhile, the work here in the Philippines actually on universal newborn hearing screening continued. We continued to do the studies for implementation, information dissemination, while we also continued our work on looking at the genetics of otitis media, which we also started doing missions in Naklan in 2006. And after about 10 years, we were able to find the gene that actually predisposed this indigenous population to otitis media, the A2ML1 gene, which was actually one that actually wreaked havoc on some of the proteins necessary for defense against bacteria in middle ear mucosa. And having been able to do this and look at microbiome shift, we're able to also look at cholesteatoma and also the ones associated with chronic suppurative otitis media, and allowed us to have a subcontracted grant from USNIH on otitis media susceptibility and middle ear microbial changes due to gene variants, and also continue the work on newborn hearing screening using novel technologies with the 123 million grant from PCARI CHED, and of course PCHRD grant that was actually smaller, just looking at mutational analysis of SLC26A4. So the HELE study that was granted by PCARI CHED continues. Now we're in our phase 2 that allow us to also look at telemedicine applications, and we were able to work with NGOs like the Starkey Foundation for our community work for intervention of hearing loss even among adults. And in the World Hearing Day seminar, I was asked to present our work on cost benefit of screening for hearing loss, a case study in the Philippines, and was able to have our work highlighted in the World Hearing Day in 2017 that looked at savings of national government for every child where intervention is done, and also led to the invitation to present our work in the United Nations World Health Assembly advocacy event on hearing health, where Barbara Bush and other experts from the world, as well as Bill Clinton in attendance, where I talked about our community-based newborn hearing screening program, the use of BA, as well as the use of a cell phone app to be able to do hearing screening with automatic registration. And here's what Bill Clinton would say.
99% of those kids could have been doing something else with their lives, could have been getting a more normal education, a more normal life, if they had been properly tested and providing the equipment.
And I was quite surprised that in the audience was Teddy Locsin Jr., who was our ambassador to the UN at that time. And he was very kind in tweeting about that particular presentation that I made, and about how we're able to represent the Philippines in our fight against hearing loss. And more importantly for me is to be able to influence and actually convince our current chair of Department of ORL, Dr. Rina Reyes Quintos, to also pursue her own doctoral studies in the same university where I finished, under the guidance also of Professor Cor Kermers, and she was able to have her PhD and graduate in 2018. So I was the co-supervisor and part of the panel at the time that Dr. Rina Reyes Quintos actually defended her thesis. And again, I was part of the panel that allowed us to actually now promulgate our own PhD by publication here at the UP College of Medicine with our first graduate, Dr. Rolando Dom Hamora, who actually presented his thesis on opportunities and challenges in the care of X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism patients in the Philippines, with a great panel of speakers from worldwide, all the experts, and this was done remotely because it was still it was still during COVID time, and we had a pandemic at that time. And here was some other pictures with Dr. Nina Castillo Carandang, who actually was his co-supervisor for his thesis. And again, also being able to be part of the panel for the MD PhD thesis dissertation, which was the best thesis dissertation award of Angelo Sumalde, whose paper was on, or thesis was on clinical and molecular determinants of audiovestibular disorders, which we are still continuing to pursue with more papers after 2018, the novel variants and unique allelic spectrum for hearing impairment among Filipino cochlear patients, as well as identification of novel candidate genes and variants for hearing loss and temporal bone anomalies. And so the work continues with now, after this, the RA 9709, the establishment of the Newborn Hearing Screening Reference Center, and our work that has now allowed Z benefits for children with hearing impairment here at the Philippine General Hospital for deaf children. And this is a National Cochlear Implant Program with a funding of 25 million that we were able to implement during the pandemic from 2019 to 2021 with patients coming from the Visayas as well as in Mindanao. And that these first 20 patients now have now been able to benefit from the cochlear implants. In fact, 3 of those we implanted for the second ear, and we were able to do this because of the enhanced community quarantine protocol that we actually were able to implement during that time. So as you can see from the Z benefits for children with hearing impairment, we're now working on phase 2 for the National Cochlear Implant Program and for hearing or HELE phase 2. And this is all to provide universal access to ear and hearing care using the hearing package of intervention as promulgated by the World Health Organization. We continue to be optimistic that we will be able to also contribute to be able to look at genetic therapy for hearing loss in the future with inner ear regeneration. And of course, it always takes a whole village to be able to do something like this. So I would like to thank everyone, the promoters, members of my doctoral committee, secretarial support and research associates who work with me, my colleagues and co-authors throughout the years, my mentors, as listed here, and of course, my colleagues in the ASEAN Academy of Neurotology, Otology, and Audiology, and of course, the administrators who supported me when I was doing my PhD. I was the assistant vice chancellor for planning and development, and later vice chancellor for planning and development when I finished my PhD. And my idols, Dr. Perla Santos Ocampo, Dr. Ernie Domingo, Dr. Nelia Maramba, and Dr. Menchit Padilla, and of course my family, who've all been supported, and my professional family here at the Philippine National Ear Institute, where we all work together so that all may hear. So I'd like to present a small video of my patients because I'd like to thank them and the parents who trusted me with their care.
Thank you for my ears.
I would like to say thank you to those who have helped in developing this amazing invention that has shocked the world, and including me.
Thank you for my ears and I can hear now.
I'd like to thank the inventors for creating the cochlear implant because without this, we cannot hear.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Arjong, the one who did the surgery for my implant. And of course, my parents and my audiologists, Tito Hebert and Kuya Miko, and my therapist, which is like Teacher Dane and Teacher Rachel and Teacher Kathy. Yeah, they've helped me a lot to the person who I am right now.
I don't remember anything because I was very fortunate enough to be implanted at a very young age and the development gone very fast for me.
Actually, I don't remember the first few days I started here because that was 12 years ago. But what I remember was the day my implant was switched on at UST. I remember everyone smiling as they turned on my implant.
Most of the sounds I've heard, and the few days where that was the air, it was like the first time I didn't have my implant, it was a hearing. So they hear the laugh here, and I'm like, I don't believe you guys. This is impossible. But then hearing every year is I've got used to it, and I like hearing air now.
And my most favorite sound in the world is rain. For one, it's relaxing and it's therapeutic.
I try to think about it. I'm like, this is the reason why I have an implant. To be able to talk to people and to be able to make friends. Because I feel like having no implant, I would just have one category of friends, just deaf people.
I don't think of myself as special because I am able to hear like a normal person and talk. And my friends don't think to be me as someone who has special needs.
I never expected that I would be able to study in a regular big school despite the condition I have.
I know that I have special needs, but what? I forget about it. I'm just like, okay, just forget about special needs and just keep living on. And I feel like special needs and normal people should be mixed together. I want to be an example for the special needs that I tell them, I'm like, what about who you are and just keep moving on. Because I think that's what life is like. For the people with disabilities, forget about their disabilities. And for the parents, I want you guys to support your kids. Even though it's really stressful and or they're very weird because I'm a very weird person and my parents stay with me all. So to really support the kids, even though we're really giving you a hard time, I want you to stay with them, encourage them because my parents, they keep encouraging me and this is why I'm really confident to this day.
So I would like to thank MedL for that video that actually featured some of my patients. And as you can see, we're so lucky that we've been able to marry the clinical work that we're doing and the research that we're doing because, and being able to use all of that experience and researches to be able to come up with a PhD dissertation that could be successfully defended. And in 2013, when I finished this, I had already made a position statement and actually a proposal for a PhD by publication to be instituted here at the University of the Philippines, Manila. While it was not acceptable at the initial outset, I was happy that in 2019, 2020, we could actually do it here, and in 2021, we were able to graduate our first PhD by publication here at the UP College of Medicine during my term as Dean. Maraming salamat again. It's quite an opportunity for me to be able to share with you my story, my what you call triumphant or maybe transformative path to a PhD. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Tetch Cruz for allowing me this opportunity to be able to share with you my journey. Maraming salamat po. Thank you, Tetch.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for that truly inspiring sharing of your journey. Thank you for gracing our 85th anniversary of the UPCM PGIM. Ma'am, our first question, we open now the forum for questions and comments. And from Ma'am Helen Sigua, she says, has someone nominated you for National Scientist Award? You are very deserving, Dean.
Thank you. That's very kind, Dr. Helen. Actually, I was elected as academician of the National Academy of Science and Technology during the pandemic. I believe it was in 2020 when I was elected.
Thank you, ma'am. You actually have so much in your CV. We just don't have time to share all the awards of Dean Tong. I think by now most of us in the academe know her already. Ma'am, there are phoned-in questions. For example, here, what is your most difficult challenge in obtaining the PhD by publication degree?
Okay, the start, no? Because as I told you, it was already in 2008 when I wanted a PhD. But you know, I cannot go anymore through the traditional PhD where you have coursework. And so when I learned about this PhD by publication, and being the only one I believe from Asia to aspire for this, when I approached Dr. Cor Kremers at that time, he just retired and he was not very receptive. So when I asked him, why weren't you too encouraging at the start? And he told me candidly that he just retired and he was depressed because when you retire in the Netherlands, they take out everything, your license to practice, your office, everything. And so at that time, he was in a limbo. But in 2011, when I approached him again, he was in a better status, better spirit. So now he could accept me. So to me, the work has been done. So I think what has not been realized was most of our researchers here in the academy is that it's important that when you do research that you focus on one particular area of study and you build on the findings of the previous one, which is something that I was able to do starting in 2003, as I mentioned in my talk, no? And I was able to build up all the papers, and you can have at least 5 studies published in the previous 10 years when you apply for a PhD by publication. So as a busy clinician, it was very difficult to write, no? Because even though your papers have been finished, you still have to write an introduction as to why it was important for you to do those studies, and then to try to summarize in the end of your thesis of how it all ties up together. So yung mahirap po doon yung trying to find the time. So I actually during I believe Christmas and Holy Week, I would actually be alone in Batangas and just writing up the papers, no, for my thesis. So trying to find the time to be able to really focus on the writing part of your thesis, because after all, the defense was also hard, medyo nakakatakot because you don't know whether it will be a successful defense. So I'd like to thank my supervisor, Professor Cor Kremers, because he actually picked me up from the airport, brought me to Nijmegen from Schiphol in Amsterdam, and he coached me as to what might be the questions that will be asked of me during the defense. And he asked me about some statistical issues that I was able to sort out because I had two para-nymph. You know, in the Netherlands, when you defend your thesis, you're allowed two para-nymph. Ito yung parang call a friend. So at that time, ang aking para-nymph ay Dr. Rina Reyes Quintos and Dr. Erasmo Llanes. So for the statistical part, I would actually ask Aries to explain to me so that I can explain if I get to be asked during my defense. So they also had the book. So in case there was a question regarding a table or some other questions, they would be able to show me where exactly in my thesis did I mention such a thing. So yun yung maganda dun sa defense doon na may parang para-nymph. Dito sa atin, with the PhD by publication that I had wanted to be started since 2013. When I finished, sinabi ko yan kay Dr. Hamir, who was then the Vice Chancellor for Administration. Sir, based on my experience, I think we should be able to do this here at the UP Manila. I in fact had some background research done already. I gave a copy to Dean Mejia before. I gave a copy to all the members of the Chancellor's management team and also to the Vice Chancellor. But there were some people who were not receptive at that time. So masaya ako that Chancellor Menchit Padilla carried on the proposal and gave me the opportunity to defend the proposal to our University Council. I remember there were 3 University Council meetings, and on the third time, ako na yung pinag-present niya. I was already the dean at that time. And then we had a majority vote for starting the PhD by publication.
Well, thank you, ma'am. The challenges encountered were not only for your personal PhD, but also you really worked for the approval of such a program, the PhD by publication, PhD in the health sciences for UP Manila. And the next question po in the Q&A box is from Charles Sia. Is the UP PhD open only to the UP PhD program, open only to otorhinolaryngology or ORL graduates? Is it only for UP graduates?
Actually, sa ngayon, most of the ones who actually apply, no, because I'm a member of the screening committee for the PhD by publication. So we have what you call a matrix, and we use the promotion matrix of the university. So there's a scoring system as to the type of publication, your leadership, your preeminence in the field, no, because the PhD by publications, it really meant not for novice researchers, but actually for senior faculty members who have been working in the field and have many publications. Kaya lang, importante doon, yung publications mo ay in the past 10 years, hindi pwedeng 20 years before. So we've been able to offer this to not necessarily UP graduates, pwedeng those who actually not graduated from UP for their medical course, but actually did residency and fellowship at the UP PGH. Most of those who took up the PhD by publication initially are faculty members, no? Dom Hamora, ST Estrella, last time si ST Estrella, but we also for doctor for health professions education. Iyon yung PhD by research, no? Yung PhD by publication, dapat naka-4 or 5 papers ka kasi na-published eh. And then you're working on another paper that will be the culminating paper for your PhD. So I believe it's doable for our faculty members doing research. And if you're a faculty member from another university who has done also research, I think it would be possible as well, no, to be able to pursue this in the University of the Philippines College of Medicine.
Thank you, ma'am. So it's not just for UP graduates. Everyone is welcome to apply. There are requirements. I think this is published in the website of UP Manila and our NGOHS. our National Graduate Office for the Health Sciences. I'd also like to make mention, ma'am, at this point, our other MD, PhD graduates of recent years, supported very well by our alumni. Very important. I'd like to say very important po yung support from family, as Ma'am Charlotte mentioned, and
Dapat,
also colleagues. Ma'am, yung It Takes a Village, kasama po din syempre. Ma'am, syempre, hindi naman kami lahat pinanganak na mayaman gaya mo.
hindi,
So, it takes
hindi ko na, hindi ko na mention doon, Tech, actually, when I started my practice, I would actually save 10% of my professional fees. Tapos nilalagay ko po yun sa isang research fund. Kaya po namin nagawa yung initial study on newborn hearing screening sa NICU kasi you have to hire a research associate. Kailangan mo bilhin yung screening device, di ba? So, doon ko kinuha po yung yung pondo doon sa aking research fund na tinabi ko na parang tinatax ko yung sarili ko. Actually,
Yes.
when I came back in 94, I had wanted to set up a temporal bone laboratory. Nakausap ko pa nga si Dr. Marcelo. Sabi sa akin, imposible ako makagkaroon ng temporal bone laboratory. Wala namang research funding at that time to support the setting up of a laboratory for temporal bones. So that was shelved. It never happened. But the collaboration with Harvard continues. So kung may mga kailangan na temporal bone histopathology studies, we just have to collaborate with Harvard. Ngayon, ito namang newborn hearing screening, maswerte lang ako na by the time na gusto na natin gawin yung study, that was starting, I think, 99, 2000, meron na enough funds yung aking research fund to support a research associate at saka makabili ng machine. Ngayon, yung namang machine na ABR for the community-based study, yung prevalence study, 750,000 pesos yung machine eh. So I had to talk to the owner of Manila Hearing Aid Center. Tapos sabi ko, pwede ko po bang hulugan kasi gagamitin namin for our research community.
Search.
So that's how we came up with the 1,000 per subject na bayad ng USNIH funding. So that includes already the newborn hearing screening, the OAE, and the ABR. So surmise namin ni Dr. Alexis Reyes kasi siya yung nag-invite sa akin to be part of that study on maternal exposure to environmental toxins and fetal outcomes. Sabi ko, sige Alexis, baka pwede bayaran mo na ako ng 1,000 per test doon sa study, and by the time we finish the study, mga 744 yon, nabayaran ko na rin yung ABR machine na hinulugan namin over the time that the study was being done. So
Yes.
that's how we were able to do and determine the prevalence of congenital hearing loss in the Philippines, which now
Yes, ma'am.
becomes the basis for the law.
Yes. Ma'am, very inspiring, very important talaga yung collaboration, multidisciplinary approach. I was mentioning kanina po, in addition to Dom and of course Faye is our first graduate of PhD by research. We also have our UP CM class 1967 Push 1 grantees. We have Weng, Dr. Henwino, we have as you mentioned, ST, Dr. Sandy De La Fuente, and Dr. Belen Dofitas. And so we encourage our not only faculty, but whoever is interested to pursue this very meaningful endeavor for health advancement in our country and even globally. We can make a contribution like you did. Ma'am, si Bill Clinton po mabait.
Ang gwapo, tsaka mabait.
Okay, so ma'am, practical question po sa phoned in. At what age is it too late to apply for PhD by publication or PhD by research?
Wala pong age limit. Actually, nagpi-PhD by publication po ngayon yung si Dr. Beth Pacheco. So actually, nung mag-enroll siya, almost retiring na siya. Pero sabi ko pa rin kay Dr. Beth Paz Pacheco, okay yan, kahit na pa-retire ka na, mag-pursue ka because you can still be asked to serve in the panel for our PhD students, and kulang na kulang tayo ng mga na pwede mag-serve as supervisor. So even if you're no longer a regular faculty, you're a clinical professor, pwede ka pa rin, or maybe you can become a professor emeritus later on with all the studies that you will be able to undertake also for your PhD. So right now, naka-enroll po si Dr. Pacheco, and I'm hoping that she will be able to finish this year her PhD by publication as well on actually she is working on diabetes mellitus and the genetic variants among Filipinos.
Yes, ma'am. Excellent papers also from Dr. Pacheco, another UPCM class 1967 push 1 grantee. So, are there any more questions that I might have missed? Meron lang po sa Q&A. Where you offered attractive faculty positions in Harvard and other foreign institutions? If you were, how did you decide to stay in the Philippines from an anonymous attendee?
Actually, as I told you the story, nung pumunta ako ng US, after I finished my board exams, I was already looking at possibly getting a residency in the US. But when I was asked by Professor Emeritus John Bordley, ano ba talaga, what's your real plan? Do you intend to practice here in the US, or do you intend to practice in your home country? So I told him my intention is really to practice in my home country. But I wanted to be abreast of all the advances in medicine by doing my training here in the US. So ang in-advise sa akin ni Professor Bordley at that time, who was actually the mentor of my father when he did his fellowship also in otology at Johns Hopkins University in 1961 when I was in my mother's womb, no? Buntis ang mami ko sa akin nung nag-fellowship ang father ko. So si Dr. John Bordley advised me to, if that's your actual intention, then I would advise that you take up your residency training in the Philippines. And he cited a few reasons why that might be better. One, sabi niya, is that you'll be able to know really well the main problems afflicting your countrymen in the Philippines, because that's where you're going to practice. Second, he said, it's good to do your residency training in your home country, because during residency, that's when you're going to establish your network of professionals, doctors who might be able to refer their cases to you, and you'll be able now to establish rapport with them, so that that will be your referral network once you finish your residency training. And because of your background, it will not be very difficult for you to also look for a fellowship position for whatever subspecialty field you might be interested in. I'm sure there will be a lot of openings for you after you finish your residency. And so you may be able to choose. And so I took that to heart. Kaya ako nag-decide to do my residency training. But during my second year, I remember it was August 8, 1988. Alam mo, may Chinese superstition. So, natira yung 888. Eh, yun, 8888, apat na 8. So, I wrote about 5 universities to apply for a fellowship in otology. Kasi nga, alam ko na gusto kong mag-cochlear implant surgeon eh. So, I was lucky, I got accepted in 4. So, namili ako doon. So, when I finish, natanggap ako sa Harvard, natanggap ako sa Zurich. So, nung nasa Harvard na ako, sabi ko, yun ang pinili ko because I wanted a better foundation, no? Kasi basic science research. So, I wanted a better foundation in otolaryngology, special otology, and neurotology. So, that's what I chose. And then, with the end view that after about a year or year and a half of research, I'll be able to do my hands-on clinical fellowship. At that time, I was thinking about Zurich. But when I was at Harvard, there was a Harvard Silkness Society meeting. I got to meet somebody from Toronto and ask him, what is the best training for neurotology in Canada? And he mentioned to me University of Toronto. And fortunately, I had a friend residing at that time in Edmonton, Alberta, yung best friend ko. So I planned to visit her because the the National ENT Society of Canada was going to have a meeting in that particular city. So pumunta ako doon and I got to meet the incoming chairman of the University of Toronto, who was a neurologist. So in-approach ko siya, sabi ko I'm interested in training in neurology. And I was lucky because sabi niya, oh, that's good because my fellow was supposed to start by July, changed her mind and she now wants to do voice and swallowing. So there's an opening for a neurology fellow next year. So yun, sinulatan ko siya. So yes, I was offered to be a faculty at Harvard, to do my PhD, to repeat my residency. But since I already had a plan at into University of Toronto, I will be given a salary of 44,000 Canadian dollars. At the same time, have a license to practice there, na educational license where I was not required anymore to do USMLE or yung Canadian exams. Sabi ko, ayoko na mag-exam ng ganon. So I was able to get that position without going through the examinations because my eventual plan was to actually practice in the Philippines. So sabi ko, hindi ko kailangan ng license in the US because I'm not going to practice there anyway. So there was a program in Canada that allowed a foreign medical graduate to have a license, educational license for training. So that's what I took.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for being with us, for coming back, for really dedicating your career and efforts in our country. Kailangan po as we all have learned through the years from chronic otitis media, where the genetic trait was found in our ati, sa mga katutubo po sa Aklan, to those who are born deaf and therefore need cochlear implantation, to educational efforts. Thank you very much, Dean Charlotte Chong. I'd like to give you the floor for your final words, ma'am, to inspire our audience. We have 254.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone who participated in the webinar. And again, thank you, Tej, for organizing this. It's really, I welcome the opportunity to share my story, to show that not everything is actually a walk in the park, no? There have been a lot of challenges, being a female, embarking on a new field of neurologic skull-base surgery. That was also difficult for me at the start. I didn't have referrals. In fact, that's the reason why I could only work with somebody junior to me. And that happened to be Director Gapli Gaspi. So we've been working as a skull-based team all these years. And I really treasure the fact that I've been able to do neurologic skull-based surgery with him all these years and form a team here at PGH. You know, the opportunities that came my way, I thank God because I know that I would not have been able to do it without His guidance. Kung hindi nyo na itatanong, nung ako po ay kumuha ng examination, PLE, hindi lumabas yung pangalan ko, so depressed po ako noon. Kaya nga siguro ako pinapunta ng father ko sa Amerika para magbisita ng mga US university. And that made the opening because that's when I learned about cochlear implantation as a new technology for hearing loss. And then that's how I formed my decision to pursue ENT, even though I was at that time a straight intern in medicine. No? Akala ko magka-cardiology ako or endocrinology. But when I learned about this new technology, sabi ko parang gusto ko yata yon yung makatulong sa mga pinapanganak na bingi, dahil naalala ko pag pinapasyal ako ng lolo ko sa Luneta, nagsisilbi sa amin doon sa nagtitinda ng sandwich, yung mga bingi na mga nandun sa Luneta. Naisip ko sila bigla nung sinabi sa akin ni Dr. Herman Jenkins na why can't you be the pioneer cochlear implant surgeon in your country? So sabi ko, mahirap na bansa ang Pilipinas pero baka nga pwede, no? So ako na-inspired din ako ni Dr. Herman Jenkins at this December pupunta dito si Dr. Herman Jenkins because we're hosting the Hearing International Congress and he's part of that HI group. So as you can see, medyo maswerte rin po na tie up ko nga po yung aking clinical work, being a surgeon at the same time enjoying research na gusto ko naman talaga bata pa ako because I really love to write. Editor-in-chief ako nung high school eh. Nung aming school paper, nakilala ko yan si Amy Marcos tsaka si Irene Marcos kasi ako yung ako yung editor-in-chief ng National Jamboree nung araw when I was a Girl Scout. So, bata pa lang ako, gusto ko naman talaga yung nagsusulat. So, nung maging member rin ako ng Ear Study Group, dahil finorm ito ni Dr. Chehamir tsaka Dr. Abes, masayang masaya ako kasi now I can do research as a resident. At yung guidance nila talagang invaluable sa akin. Pati na rin yung pagpapadala sa akin ni Dr. Chehamir na after office hours, after the clinics and OPD, pupunta ako sa internal medicine doon sa likod, sa may residence call room. Kasi meron kami mga lectures doon about epidemiology. Kasi kakatayo pa lang ni Dr. Ernie Domingo ng Clinical Epidemiology Unit at that time. Akala ko nga magki-clinical epidemiology ako eh. That would have been my plan B kung gusto kong mag-stay pa ng konti sa Canada. Pero since na-invite na ako ni Dr. Manuel Lim na umuwi na ng Pilipinas to become a faculty, nag-decide na rin ako na wag na ako mag-masters in clinical epi sa Canada, but umuwi na lang ako sa Pilipinas and start my work. And I did not realize na in 4 years makakagawa ko ng cochlear implantation. Again, nangyari lang yon kasi nakilala ko si George Muller in I think 1996. Ayun pala ang kanyang asawa, Pilipina. So sabi ko, why don't you set up your headquarters for cochlear implants in the Philippines instead of Singapore or Hong Kong? Nagkataon, nanalo yung Pilipinang asawa niya. So ayun, dito sila nagsettle. That's why we had access to cochlear implants. At kaya natin nagawa yun in 1997, 1998. Maswerte tayo, may dalawa tayong post-lingually deafened adults na nabigyan ng free implants dahil naimbita natin yung may-ari ng kumpanya ng MedL. Si Dr. Javier was the chairman then. So in closing, what I can say is that the journey has been not a walk in the park, but it's been very gratifying because opportunities just came. At ang lesson talaga na nakuha ko in all these years is basta be persistent and pray, and God will lead you. Kasi maraming challenges nung hindi lumabas ang pangalan ko do sa PLE. Akala ko bumagsak ako. Nung ako ay clerk, nahulog ako sa hagdan. Nagkaroon ako ng sugat dito, kaya 1 month of surgery, hindi ako nakarotate. Pero, but all those, nahilo ko. So siguro kaya ako nag-neurotology din. Kasi 1 month ako nahilo, na-depress ako. Halos inuuntog ko yata yung ulo ko sa pader dahil gusto ko sana mawala na yung hilo ko. So kala ko hindi na ako makaka-finish ng medicine dito sa College of Medicine. Pero awa ng Diyos, gumaling naman ako. Isang araw nagising ako, hindi na ako nahihilo. So, yung experience ko as a patient, as a vertiginous for 1 month, probably also propelled me to decide to go into neurology and help people with dizziness and vertigo. So, everything actually ties up in the end. Ayoko naman sabihin in the end na ako, but actually, that has led me to being able to promulgate the PhD by publication, support some of our faculty wishing to do the same. I would like to thank UPCM Class 67 for allowing us to have their generous donations for supporting our PhD students here, especially among our faculty. Because I believe that any national university like ours should have more PhDs among our faculty. And in the future, maybe also accept students who already have their PhD to learn medicine, as what's being done in some other centers of excellence. And what I can say is that for the past 6 years, during my term as dean, it has allowed me a bigger opportunity to pursue some of the things that I thought would be best for our college. At ako naman po ay masaya at very grateful na ituloy po natin yung mga gusto nating mangyari. Despite all the challenges of pandemic, we were able to build this building, we were able to promote our programs. Thanks to UTech, nagkaroon tayo ng double degree program, MD-MPH, and hopefully MD-MCE, Masters of Clinical Epi, and other programs for the clinical sciences. And I hope in the next 2 to 3 years as your dean, I'll be able to help propel this, and with all the support of our faculty, our students, and our administrators like UTech, tulong-tulungan natin na magawa lahat ng mga pwede pa natin gawin in the next 2 to 3 years of my third term as the Dean. I believe we've been so blessed, and I continue to thank God for all the blessings that we continue to receive. I think that we still have a lot of things that we can do to help other schools of medicine as well, trying to build their own curricula for medical schools. Baka yung ating kagustuhan na magkaroon talaga ng doktor for every Filipino ay mangyari na, hopefully, because of the Doctor sa Bayan Law. But hopefully maganda ang maging graduates nila para the people they graduate from those universities will be trusted by the public and be able to really help the communities in terms of universal healthcare. So yun lang po ang gusto kong sabihin. Medyo mahaba yung aking closing speech, pero tama-tama po, alauna na po eh. Thank you po.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We'd like to, as a token of our gratitude, we at the PGIM, in celebration of the 85th year anniversary, Moonstone pala yun, ma'am, would like to present you with this certificate of appreciation. May we please show the certificate? And your indeed contribution not only to our anniversary, but PGIM and its evolution and progress has been exceptional, Dean Charlotte M. Chong, and we thank you so much for that. In closing, we'd like to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. We are 258 in the highest number, and we'd like to invite everyone again as part of the 85th anniversary celebration. This time, our very own experience. If you take up your PhD by research and PhD by publication, dito po sa mismong UP Manila, we can learn from the journeys of Dr. Faye and Dr. Dominic, and we will see you again on Wednesday. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat ulit.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Assistant Director June Dumlao. Thank you, Cyril of PGIM. Thank you, Jego. Thank you, Ferdy. Thank you for the entire team who brought us the webinar today. Thank you po.
Thank you. We can share the recording.
Yes, ma'am. We will upload it sa Panopto, as you said, and the UPCM website.
Okay, salamat. Thank you.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Ako si Professor Charlotte Chong, anyong dekana, at balugod ko kayong sinasalubong mga natatanging mag-aaral sa simula ng inyong landas na tatahakin sa mundo ng medisina. Ang Kolehiyo ng Medisina ang siyang inaasahan ng sambayanan na tutugon sa kanilang mga pangangailangang pangkalusugan. Dito magsisimula ang inyong paglalakbay. Sa mga silid na puno ng kasaysayan, matututo kayong suriin ang anatomiya sa tradisyonal na paraan. Ngunit dahil sa pandemya, gagamitan rin natin ang tulong ng teknolohiya Matututunan natin ang batayang proseso ng ating pisolohiya at kimika, ang patolohiya at parmakolohiya. Mabubuo ng ating matatag na pundasyon sa pag-unawa ng medisina.
Ibig sabihin ng OSI ay Organ System Integrated. Ang ginagamit na tema sa pagsama ng mga disiplina o asignatura ng curriculum ay ang organ system ng katawan. Pinapakita sa mag-aaral ang relasyon ng bawat disiplina sa isa't isa imbis na hiwa-hiwalay na pagtuturo ng bawat disiplina. Halimbawa, sa traditional na pag-aaral sa medisina, hiwalay ang basic science kagaya ng anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, pathology na karaniwang kinukuha sa una at pangalawang taon ng medisina. At ang kagaya ng internal medicine, surgery o kaya pediatrics ay kinukuha sa ikatlo o apat na taon. Sa OSI, maaaring matutunan ng mag-aaral ang ibang aspeto ng disiplinang klinikal sa una o pangalawang taon pa lang ng pag-aaral. Binabalikan din ang mga aspeto ng basic science sa ikatlo o ika-apat na taon. Maaga ring ipinapakilala ang mga pasyente sa mag-aaral. Hindi lang binibigyan pansin ang kaalaman, knowledge, kundi pati na ang kasanayan, skills, at ang ugali o attitude upang tiyakin na natamo ng mga mag-aaral ang kailangan nilang matutunan para maging isang mahusay, mahabagin at maasahang doktor para sa bayan.
Dito sa Kolehiyo ng Medisina, tinuturuan namin ang mga mag-aaral ng pangunahing kaalaman kung paano ang tama at kalidad na paraan ng pagsagawa ng makabuluhang pananaliksik na akma sa kalagayan ng kalusugan ng ating bansa. Tinuturuan din natin ang mga mag-aaral ng angkop na pamaraan ng kritikal na pagsuri at paggamit ng mga resulta ng pananaliksik at siyensya sa pangangalaga ng kalusugan ng bawat individual, komunidad at ng bayan. Binibigyan din natin ng pagkakataon ang mga mag-aaral na magabayan ng mga batikang mananaliksik upang sila ay magkaroon ng inspirasyon at kakayahan sa pagtuklas ng bago at sulit na pamamaraan ng paghatid ng pangangalaga ng kalusugan. Nagbibigay ng suporta ang kolehiyo sa pamamagitan ng mga pondo para sa pagsagawa ng mga proyektong pananaliksik, pondo para maipamahagi ang resulta ng pananaliksik sa mga pagpupulong at talakayan at mailathala ito sa mga pangunahing akademikong journal tulad ng Acta Medica Filipina.
Ang kolehiyo ay tumutulong sa mga estudyante sa pamamagitan ng paghahanap at pamimigay ng scholarship at financial assistance. Tinutulungan din sila sa kanilang pag-aaral sa pamamagitan ng pamimigay ng laptop assistance, laptop loan, data load, or PPE kung kinakailangan.
Sa UP College of Medicine, naniniwala kami na mahalaga ang mental health at well-being ng mga estudyante. Meron kaming mga wellness activities na tulad ng mindfulness-based techniques, qigong, stress management techniques, and resilience strategies. At nagkaroon na rin kami ng pagkakataon na dalhin ang mga estudyante sa Pinto Art Museum. sila na mag-exercise, kaya nagkaroon ng Inter-Class Fitness Challenge. Pero higit sa lahat, kinakailangan na suriin kung ang paraan ng pagtuturo ay nagdudulot ng burnout. Sana naman sila ay masaya habang sila ay nag-aaral sa medisina. At kung sila ay nakakaramdam ng simptomas ng depression at ng nerbiyos na kinakailangang kumonsulta sa guidance counselor o sa doktor.